Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Altered TCG Tournament Results Recap provided by A Hero's Guide to Asgartha. This week we had a whole bunch of tournaments that we need to go through, starting with our Monday tournament on for a wall with 122 players. There were two undefeated players that actually made it through. This Nico being the first one, DSL Walise being the second, Basira and Sigismar being the two heroes that have made it out. What we are seeing is representation across the board, with almost 1/4 of all participants being in the Bravos faction. We are going to see that across all tournaments where there is a larger representation there than anyone else. And the faction that is being least represented or is struggling the most in this is going to be your Muna faction, at least on this AWOL. We'll see if that holds true throughout the rest of the tournaments. So let's have a quick look at our two heroes or two pilots that have gone undefeated here. The first one being this Nico, piloting Basira and Kaisermon. Very much more aggressively focused build, only Arcolano Milk being the only, in this case it says gears, but it's the only permanent that they have available to them. You are seeing one copy of the Hunger just for those sticky situations, especially if that card comes in late. But number of Duel of Grits, Mana Eruption, Twinkle Twinkle, and Physical Training to get the card draw there as well. Let's have a look at the uniques that this Nico has used as well. So the first being a 1/2 Ouroboros Trickster for 1/1/0 with an arrow effect that says you may discard one of your mana orbs. If you do, characters you control gain 1 boost, and when played from reserve, roll a dice on a 4+. I gain 2 boosts, otherwise I gain 1. Interesting one. It's more because they're so focused on having lots of characters out. The additional boost would be very, very good for this, especially in the late game when you're going to have 4, 5, or potentially 6 characters on the board. Very, very good and very cheap, given it costs just 1 from hand and 2 from reserve. The next unique that they have is an Ozma 2/2 for 1/1/1, and when I leave the expedition zone, if I have 2 or more boosts, draw a card. It also has the benefit of at dusk, if I have 2 or more boosts, draw a card. So a double draw happening twice. One when it leaves the expedition, the other one at dusk. So you're at least guaranteed one of those if it does get removed. But the potential for 4 draws over 2 days is fantastic. And then the third one being a Lyra Navigator 002. When played from anywhere, I gain 2 boosts, and when played from anywhere again, I draw a card. So they are overcoming the greatest fallback for the Bravos faction, which is card draw. The second hero that did really, really well in this tournament was DSL Walitse's Sigismar in Wingspan, and we are seeing a very much traditional build in terms of having lots of characters that are very cheap. One of the things to note, though, is they are having 3 Ebenezer Scrooges. In my mind, that is very much a traced killer in terms of making everything cost a little bit more. And Isitok as well, so if you do have issues with some of the heroes that you play against, at least it stops progression on one side of their board. Very interesting. Gifts of Self, Teamwork Training, License Withdrawals. Those cards are absolute staples in the way that Sigismar is built today. But for a landmark, using the town square. So very, very interesting that they're going down that path to get the boosts. If when they do make the right triggers, late game is going to be very useful. And it doesn't cost as much, being just 2 from hand and 2 from reserve. In terms of the uniques that DSL Walitse uses, the first one being a 1/1 Orders Trooper for 0/1/1, and when another non-token character joins your expedition, if you control a token, resupply. So this is a resupply style deck. The second one being an Orders Trooper, again 1/1 for 1/1/0, and when another non-token character joins your expedition, resupply. So this one does not require the token, but because you're in Sigismar, you'll always have that. And the third one being a 1/1, so very cheap uniques for 1/0/0. Paper Herald, and when another non-token character joins your expedition, if you control a token, resupply. Very, very strong, very good. I like seeing these resupply builds within Sigismar. It just means that you've got to have potentially many more of your characters that you play or cards that you have that could potentially be resupplied have an effect that you can use from when it comes out as a resupply. Isitok's also very useful for the card draw there as well when it's resupplied. The That will then take us to the Ligue Latam, also on Mondays. This is more done rather than the European one, which the last tournament was. This is very much for the Americas. 45 players showing up, and we had one character go undefeated here, and that character is Traced and Rossum, as piloted by AFTU Juang JG. And you are seeing here a very traditional, once again, I'm using the word traditional, what we're getting accustomed to using: 2 Kellon cylinders, 3 Havon Barros Bastions. I think 5 is the right amount to have, 2 bug out bags. So this is looking a little bit more of getting more benefits. But the one thing you're seeing here is they have got 1 Avalanche and 1 Kellon Burst, noting that Traced and Rossum have the probability of not having as much interaction with their opponent, looking to bring just one-ofs for those just-in-case scenarios. Abby Sap Courier is also an interesting one where we've got some 2-ofs, and even some of these cards are actually just 1-ofs. In terms of how they use their split, not going down the 3 of every kind. This will make some players happy. For me, it does reduce some of the consistency in a deck, but you do have to also be a little versatile. In terms of the uniques that they had, though, the first one was a Kellon Elemental, 3/3 for 2/0/4. And that has 2 from anywhere abilities. You may put a card from your hand in reserve, and I gain 1 boost for each card in your reserve. It also has a quick action that when discarded in your reserve, the next card you play this afternoon costs 1 less. Quite interesting. I like the Anansi effect of gaining a boost for each card in your reserve, but it is much more expensive, given it is a 3/3 rather than a 2 cost from reserve when played, or even from hand. The second one is an Ada Lovelace, 3/2 for 2/2/1. From an arrow effect of you may put a card from your hand in reserve, and if it is a permanent, I gain 1 boost for each card in each player's reserve. So once again, a similar Anansi, except this has to be a permanent to get that benefit. And when played from hand, the next card you play this afternoon costs 1 less. The third one is another 3 costs, but 3/3 Foundry Engineer for a 1/2/2 in stats. And when played from anywhere, you may put a card from your reserve you may put a card from your hand in reserve, and if you do, resupply. And when played from your hand, the next permanent you play this afternoon cost 2 less. So a little different than some of the other builds. I love the Anansi effect, but because it's boosted, there is more functionality when you're playing against it, though, to be able to get rid of it. But if you don't have those in hand, it will be a very hard day playing against this Traced build. That takes us to the Tuesday tournaments with a single elimination happening. This is Kohlrabi's tournament, and Bijitak winning this tournament using Sigismar and Wingspan. Very good work for them. And what we will see is much like what you see elsewhere in terms of the majority of the characters. This does have the Bumblebee. We're starting to see more of Bumblebee be used as people try it out for the anchoring ability, but more spell heavy than what we saw earlier. Rallying Call, Gifts of Self, Teamwork Tainting, Tiny Jail, still keeping to 9 in terms of spells, but just having a couple of 1-offs and a couple of 2-offs, and of course License Withdrawal being the staple in there. Bijitak's uniques, though, that they had was a Ratatosco 1/2 for 1/0/0 in stats, and when played from reserve, if you control a token, draw a card. And also has the ability that a lot of Sigismar players look for: when another non-token character joins your expedition, create an Ordis Recruit 1/1/1 soldier token in your companion expedition. In this case, it's fixed to the companion one. Then also has a quick ability of create an Ordis Recruits 1/1/1 soldier token in your companion expedition. The next one is an Ozma 2/2 for 1/1/2, and if you have less than 8 mana orbs, draw a card. So that's played from anywhere, so a double draw over the 2 days. And then the third one is a 3/3 Monolith Runescribe for 3/1/3. When played from anywhere, if you control a token, draw a card. And this also has the quick ability of create an Orders Recruit 1/1/1 soldier token in your companion expedition. That then takes us to AQZ Nook series. So of course here there is no uniques allowed in this tournament, and Rin and Orchid winning this, and also Rin and Orchid coming in second. Very, very good job. And what you're seeing here is less and less representation in the Izmir faction for the first time, that at least I recall seeing, much lower than your Muna decks. Moon is starting to take up a lot more in this format, given the uniques that can remove them are not as prevalent here. But it is surprising to see Tasia not being the most represented deck here in Nook, but it was Rin from the Muna faction. And of course, Kojo being a staple there. Traced, which has also performed well in Nook, was not as well represented, with Sierra having a little bit more representation there, as I can see. Or very close to. Now, ALR Zoa was the winner, going undefeated in this tournament. Burrowing Nushes are a part of what they see Persephone, so they can get the additional card draws when you wouldn't normally have it. Flore, I would assume, to be used so that it stays in reserve as much as possible. Even a Lord Kelvin rare, as well as a couple of Lokis. Now, the Lokis in Muna do not give you the same effect as the rare ones in Lyra give you, but they're still good to be able to say, if you don't have many cards in hand, play it and you can draw 3. They use Magic Beans, and from their spells, the Sow, the Sap Dispersals, Requiem, and Lost in the Woods. So 2 different kinds of removal in Requiem and Lost in the Woods, but very well done and very interesting build. I've seen a lot more of Rin and Orchid be played online, and we saw that as well in this tournament. That takes us to the AQZ Nook series for the 13th of August. So the first one was for the 6th of August, and that was because a lot of the information wasn't available in 39 cards. But in this one, the 13th of August, we had a Trace and Rossum win as piloted by BWatt AMO. Well done to them. And you can see Trace and Rossum, as I said earlier, very, very strong. 3 Haven Bravos Bastions there. And also having ways of energizing or reusing the Bravos Bastion from when played from anywhere effect through Dr. Frankenstein. You've got Vike available there in case you get your cards not sabotaged but exhausted, playing them again. The Grems, you've got 2 rares and 1 common. We're starting to see that blend a lot more in the Trace builds. For those decks that have 5 or more permanents, but also some not wasting a rare spot for those decks that you don't have it. Very well done. 2 avalanches in this case, 1 Kalon Burst. Once again, starting to introduce those cards that will also be able to remove things from the board rather than just focusing on one side. Very, very strong build. I love Amelia Earhart. It's so cheap when played from reserve, and once you're active, that is fantastic. But that then takes us to Wednesday tournaments, and that is AWOL Season 3 Week 9, and there was one hero, and this was a very big surprise for me, that won this, and this is Akesha and Taru. And Akesha and Taru being piloted by Revert Aphanis, really trying to take a stand on the changes being made to Aphanis. It looks very similar to an Aphanis build in the sense that there is so many spells and some landmarks in here. The Katagear, Aether Shard, the stage. The stage is pretty interesting actually in terms of this build. Trying to delay but having more focus on the spells than you would on the characters themselves. So really looking for that. Sounds a bit more like that hostage style play where then you can win on the back end because of Celebration Day, because of Small Step Giant Leap. This is a really hard deck to play against. Not saying that you want to, but it's more if you get stuck in that loop and there is no way of winning. Sometimes it's difficult for people to just give up, given that's not what you do, especially when there's no hope. I'm not a fan of playing against these decks or seeing these decks build, but it is a strategy that we must focus on. And in terms of their uniques that they played, 3 Isotok uniques, all of which cost 5 from hand and 5 from reserve. The first one being a 2/4/2, the second one being 2/2/4, and the third one being 3/4/3. And the effects that they have is your traditional Isotok is your other expedition, your other expedition, and the expedition facing it can't move forward. So that's the same on both of them. The first Isotok also has a from hand where ability you may put a card from your hand in reserve. If it's a spell, each player sacrifices a character. Very nice. The second one has a from hand if you control one or more landmarks, draw a card. And the third one has if you play it from reserve, you can resupply. And very strong, very disruptive, very difficult to play against. On the Thursday, we do have the AQZ Championship tournaments. Now, this is a big one, 75 players. That was in there this week with 5-0. There were 2 players that went 5-0 undefeated in this tournament, a Tasia and Naura player and an Afanas and Senka player. So Afanas still being able to represent in this after the nerf. Now, what do we have here is Solikim with Tasia and Muna, really going down the path of using not only the Spindle but also the Lyra Festival, giving themselves options on how they will play this. I'm interested to see the type of uniques that they had in play, and what we are seeing here is 3 Muna Caregivers, all of which cost 2 from hand, 2 from reserve. The first one being 0/1/1, and it has the ability of if you control 1 or more landmarks, up to 1 target character gains a sleep. Interesting. And then from reserve, target character gains 2 boosts, and then a quick ability of up to 1 target character with hand cost 3 or less other than me gains anchored. And just note that is the quick ability across the 3 of the Muna Caregivers they have as uniques. The second one also has a from anywhere. It says you may put a card from your hand in reserve. If you do, up to 1 target character gains a sleep, and you may have it gain 2 boosts. Again, the sleep being key here. And when I gain 1 or more boosts, up to 1 target character with hand cost 3 or less other than me gains anchored. That is a brilliant card if you're going for the festival build. The third one has the ability of from anywhere. Sorry, it is 0/1/0. If you control 2 or more plants other than me, target character gains 2 boosts. And if you control 1 or more landmarks, up to 1 target character gains a sleep. So giving themselves options on both fronts with the anchoring facilitation as well as the festival builds. Very well done. I struggle against these decks a lot. But then we had Afanas and Senka after the ban going through, getting their way forward. We're still seeing some of these one cost cards in Beauty Sleep, in Sleight of Hand, in Magical Training be used, but more on the 2 cost where possible, and really still very light in terms of the heroes that are being played. The characters that are being played. The introduction of Nylum Spies is an interesting one as well as Scholar's Vault, to be able to, I guess, find ways of making some of their cards, their spells, be more valuable. Given what happens. But Ortelis had 3 unique Katagiran Mage Dancers. The first one is 2/2 for 2/1/0, and when you play a spell, resupply. And when I leave the expedition zone, if you control 1 or more landmarks, you may return a spell from your reserve to your hand. Not bad, especially with the resupply that has just occurred. The other one is a 2/2/0/1/1, and if you control 1 or more landmarks, draw a card, and when you play a spell, resupply. So this is not bad at all, and they managed to get the win. And the third unique was 3/2 for 2/1/0, and when you play a spell, resupply. Also, when I leave the expedition zone and draw a card. Very, very nice work on those. And congratulations being the first person, at least in one of the major tournaments, to be able to take Afanas to a win without all the benefits they once had. So this is very, very well done. Popayet was also a hit person that made it 3-0 here. I'm sorry, there were three, and I mentioned two. There was the third, and that is Popayet to the O, and they went on Trayston Rossum. And you can see here 5 landmarks, frozen delivery, and hooked. This is more character based than it is interaction with your opponent based. And they had 3 Axiom salvages as their uniques in their build. 2-1 for a 1-0-1, and you may, when played from anywhere, you may put a card from your hand in reserve if you do resupply, really trying to get Trayston Rossum activated as soon as possible. The second one being a 2-1 for 2-1-2, and when played from hand, you may put a card from your hand in reserve if you do resupply. And the third one is a 2-1 for 1-1-1 from anywhere. You may put a card from your hand in reserve if you do resupply. Really, really strong on that one. Now, we are going to go back because that AQZ Championship was from the 7th of August. We also have one from the 14th of August, just to try to play catch up with the weeks that where this tournament was not put on 39 cards. And here we also had 3 heroes go undefeated. My good friend the Bravos Hatter with Sigismar and Wingspan and their build, using one of my own Kokobas actually as their unique, and 2 amazing Sandmans. And you're also very much focused on Gift of Self, Teamwork Training, License Withdrawal, but including the Monolith, Orders Bastion. So getting those cheap those characters out and finding a way of getting that additional boost, because it's a 5 cost, a little bit harder to remove, and it is matchup dependent whether you decide to play this or not. Nothing out of the ordinary for me, but I am interested to share with you the uniques that they had. The first, the Kokoba, is 4-4 for 2-2-2. When played from hand, create an Orders Recruit soldier token in your companion expedition, and it does give you control 4 or more characters. Draw 2 cards. When another non-token character joins your expedition, create an Orders Recruit soldier 1/1/1 soldier token in your hero expedition. Lots of things that can happen here. If you have the ability of sleeping this, especially if the game is prolonged, this can be beneficial for many turns of getting you those additional 2 cards, especially because of the spawning functionality that sits within it. We also had a 4/4 2/2/0 the Sandman, and when played from anywhere, if you have less than 8 mana orbs, up to 1 target character gains a sleep. And when I leave the expedition zone, if you have less than 8 mana orbs, draw 2 cards. Lovely. And the third one is another Sandman for 4/4 for 2/2/0, so the same stats with different abilities, and this is when played from anywhere, create 2 Orders Recruit 1/1/1 token soldiers in my expedition. And if you would, when played from hand, if you control a token up to 1 target character gains a sleep, you may have it gain 2 boosts. And when played from reserve, up to 2 target characters each gain 2 boosts. Really, really strong in terms of its output. We also had KRA Keifu go undefeated with a Trayston Rossum build, very similar to what we have seen before, using Repotted Otters and Tinkerbells as their uniques, but there's also the inclusion of Avalanche and Boom. So this is a deck that says you need to have some level of removal. Was not happy without it. And their uniques are 2 Repotted Otters and a Tinkerbell. The first one is 3/2 for 2/2/1. When played from reserve, each player may put a card from their hand in reserve. And when a card goes from your hand or deck to reserve, create a Brass Bug 2/2/2 robot token in your other expedition, the one I'm not in. And the second Repotted Otter, 3/3 for 1/3/1. When played from anywhere, each player may put a card from their hand in reserve. And when a card goes from your hand or deck to reserve, create a Brass Bug 2/2/2 robot token in your other expedition. So both very similar cards, really benefiting from the Brass Bug token, especially as it goes in your other expedition, so you're able to balance what you're doing. The Tinkerbell is a 3/3 for 2/0/2, and from anywhere draw a card, and when I leave the expedition zone, you may put a card from your hand in reserve. If you do, sabotage. Easy Lopez was the next undefeated pilot of Tasia and Naura, and repeating the efforts later on in the week, where they went very close to winning in the BGA tournament for Europe to get that place in France. Now we had here their build focus really much on anchoring, mass anchoring, and we should really just be focused on their uniques. They have got the spindle, of course, to make sure things, when anything tries to remove it, it costs a lot more. Floral tents very much central to that build, and the first of their uniques was a 2-2-3-0-2 Keylon Elemental. When played from reserve, you may put a card from your hand in reserve. And when a character you control gains one or more boosts, if you control two or more boosted characters, up to one target character with hand cost 3 or less other than me gains anchored. The second and the third are both Capelias for 3 and 2 costs from reserve, and both giving you the stats of 1-2-2. And they both say, when I go to reserve from the expedition zone, you may play me for free and I gain a sleep. The difference between them both is the one of the Capelius has the when a character you control gains one or more boost, up to one target character with hand cost 3 or less other than me gains anchored. Once again, mass anchoring, huge here. And then the second one is when another character joins your expeditions, if you control 2 or more plants other than me, up to 2 target characters each gain 1 boost. Then that takes us to the final tournament, which is the BGA World WCQ European Championship, as hosted by AWOL, and first place goes to Giacomozu. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. On Basira and Kaisermon, not the most populous hero in Bravos, but taking the win. That in terms of representation, Kojo was the biggest one. Trace was huge. Sigismar was also huge, but it is Basira. It is Basira that takes the win. The funny story here is they do have 3 uniques as they presented. Unfortunately, they listed one of those uniques on the market and it sold overnight when it went to Top Cut, and they could not have their Order Spy. They had to replace it with a common card in the Top Cut, but they still managed to win. So they had a 2-2 Ouroboros Trickster 0-1-0. When played from anywhere, roll a die on a 4+. I gain 2 boosts, otherwise I gain 1 boost, and at dusk if I have 2 or more boosts, draw a card. Second, and they'll always get that just because they'll get the 1 benefit from Basira in and of itself. Second unique was a Bravos Trailblazer, 3-3 for 2-3-0. When played from anywhere, if I'm the only character in my expedition, draw a card. That's great because you can play characters later and the effect was still already in play. And when played from hand, you may have me gain fleeting. If you do, I gain 1 boost per fleeting character you control. Not an ability you see very often in these top tables. And then we had the Order Spy that was only played during the Swiss rounds of day 1. When played from anywhere, a 3-3-1-1-2. When played from anywhere, you may put a card from your hand in reserve. If you do, sabotage. And when another character joins your expedition, if I have 1 or more boosts, target character gains 2 boosts. Now that is the end of our day. It is fantastic that Basira got that place. Congratulations to Giacomozu for being the next player to book their ticket to Paris, an Italian joining an American, and the rest of the French-related individuals that have made it through. My favorite part in Giacomozu's deck, though, is the not only 3 Eclutes, but also 2 Hungers to really take care of those annoying creatures or annoying permanents that stay around for a long time. You also have in here the tiny djinns to be able to look to ramp where possible. And very, very well done, and congratulations to all our winners this week.